What's up, guys? It's Bradley with the Insurance Guys podcast. Hey, look, recently I actually got 2 more days out of my month. If you know me and you know how tight my schedule is, me getting 2 more days is huge. And I'm going to tell you how I did that. I did that with CoverDesk. Guys, this is not a testimonial, even though they are a sponsor. It's not a testimonial. It's not a made-up story. This is a real-life story. Me as a new agency owner, obviously, my business organization chart, I fill 80% of the seats, right? Well, one of the things that I do, because I wanted to make sure that my people get paid right, is I reconcile all my commission statements for all my carriers. And literally, guys, when it comes around payroll time, it takes 2 whole days for me to reconcile for the agency and reconcile for my agents. And I recently trained my CoverDesk virtual assistant on how to reconcile the agency commissions for my management system, which I'll say is not a popular management system. It's a newer management system. And I was able to train her how to do that. Literally, guys and gals, it bought me 2 extra days in the month. I could get 2 more days of production, get 2 more days with my family. Think about what you could get from 2 days. That's what this service from CoverDesk has provided me. Give CoverDesk a call or head over to www.coverdesk.com. Thanks.
Insurance agents from around the world, welcome to the Insurance Guys podcast. My name is Scott Howell, your fearless host and leader, insurance agency owner and insurance evangelist for I Protect Insurance and Financial Services, based out of Huntsville, Alabama. And before we get started on today's episode, please help me welcome. He is a 6'3" sophomore from Saraland, Alabama, parade first team All-American, Rivals 5-star recruit. He is a fantastic insurance agent and a great American. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome the incomparable Mr. Bradley Flowers. How are you, Bradley?
Great, Scott. How are you today?
I'm the best I have ever been. I am proud to be above ground today, ladies and gentlemen. Bradley, before we get started on this podcast, I need to send out heartfelt condolences to an old friend of mine. In the year of our Lord, 1995, I graduated from Gunslinger School, which was also called Anti-Terrorism School in Chesapeake, Virginia, as part of the United States Marine Corps. I was stationed at the headquarters for naval activity in Europe in December of 1995. And we guarded the headquarters for naval activity over there. Basically, we bounced communications from the U.S. over to the Mediterranean. If you remember correctly, I think we were in Bosnia at that time. So we guarded that building, which was right across the street from the U.S. Embassy. About 6 months into my duty there, ladies and gentlemen, I met a young lady, and her name was Katie Rogers. Katie Rogers was in London. Well, why was Katie Rogers in London? Well, she was in London because her dad was a U.S. diplomat over there, an ambassador diplomat for the United States. And we dated for the better part of about a year while I remained over there. I was over there for a total of 18 months, and we kind of dated off and on while I was over there. And the reason I bring this up, there is a conclusion to this story. Today is February the 17th, 2021, and I am quite positive that she is mourning the passing of her now husband, Mr. Rush Limbaugh. She married Rush. It's been years ago now, and we have mutual friends in South Florida, so we stay in touch that way. And, you know, Rush Limbaugh is a media icon. He did the Rush Limbaugh Show for 33 years. He was kind of the conservative version of Howard Stern.
I didn't realize he passed away this morning.
He did. He passed away today. And I send heartfelt condolences out to her and their family. I know this is a very difficult time for them. I know that she loved him very much, and I know that he was very good to her. I'm sure she's probably going through a lot of emotions today, but I hate that for their family and for a lot of people. You know, Bradley, Rush Limbaugh was a big deal. I mean, truly a media icon for 33 years. In 1987, the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, did away with the fairness doctrine, which meant that you had to present both sides of the story, per se. And it was shortly after that, in early 1988, that he came up with the Rush Limbaugh Show. And here we are 33 years later. Man, I just hate it for them and their family, but he lived a great life. He lived a very storied life, and I'm sure that he will always be remembered for the work that he did in broadcasting. So, Bradley?
What's up?
Where have you and I been the last few weeks? I have been in Key West, Florida. I think I look a little, well, I don't know about that. I was going to say I look a little more tan than you do. I was in Key West, Florida for 5 days last week, came home to a snowstorm. You were in
Mexico.
What part did you tell me?
Cancun.
Tell me your favorite part of Cancun, Mexico.
The margaritas.
Let me tell you something about Key West, Florida, ladies and gentlemen. It is, when you're a kid and you think about like little villages in Florida, like little seaside communities, like you have this thing built up in your mind, it's Key West. It's just a seaside community. But the damnedest thing about it, and I still to this day am a little perplexed by this, although I've done some research and found out why it's this way. Bradley, there are chickens everywhere in Key West, Florida. Everywhere. So much so that a few months ago, there was a news article that came out that they are trying to do some things to kind of, I guess, back off the throttle a little bit on the chickens, but there are chickens all over Key West, Florida. Do not need an alarm clock in Key West, Florida, ladies and gentlemen. You will be woken up when the sun comes up around 7 a.m. I can promise you that. But we had a great time. I know, Bradley, I know you had a great time. I needed it. It's been a long time since I'd had a vacation and been through a lot last year. And of course, everybody on this listening to this podcast right now is like, shit, I need a vacation too. And
I know,
sometimes you just have to recharge the batteries. But guys, the mission of this podcast never changes. We are here for you. We are here to move your agency one step forward to greatness. And today, I think we have a very, very interesting and a guest that can help you move that ball one step towards the goal line. And now I want to go ahead and give him the introduction that he's always deserved. Ladies and gentlemen, he was born in Orange County, California, and resides in Irvine, California. He studied at both the University of Southern California and Marshall School of Business. And in the early 2000s was the area vice president for Arthur J. Gallagher, one of the largest international insurance brokers in the world. He is the president of Goodman Insurance Services in Southern California, specializing in insurance for contractors. And he is the president of Foundation Capital Finance, specializing in commercial premium finance. Last but certainly not least, he is also the president of Total CSR, where they modernize the hiring and training for the next generation of insurance professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor today to introduce to you first-time guest on the Insurance Guys podcast, Mr. Justin Goodman. How are you, Justin?
I'm wonderful. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Man, thank you for being here today. We got a lot to talk about, but Bradley and I stopped you before you told a 5 to 7 minute funny story about being in Texas, I believe last week. So before we get started on the podcast, you got to tell our audience, I love stories. I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories. Tell us the funny story about being in Texas.
So my family, we love Texas. I think we're adopted Texans in a lot of ways. We're there 7 or 8 times a year. But last week, we departed for Texas because I've got some investment properties down there, and their favorite thing in the world is to stay at this ranch called Texas Safari Ranch. It's basically 1,000 acres. It's a VRBO property, but we get the run of the ranch. My wife is befriended the owners, et cetera. So it's a wonderful time. But anyway, we headed out to Texas and we went down. We were down in the Waco area and we're staying there. And all of a sudden the temperature keeps dropping. So this weekend, we got back yesterday, but all of a sudden this once in a generation storm is coming in. And from everything we're hearing from the people we're talking to is the Texans aren't ready for this. They don't, they have cold weather, but not like this. And so we are trying to get back my kids for school. We needed to get them back Monday night. And all of a sudden the flights start to be canceled because they see what's coming in. We're on this ranch in the middle of nowhere, and we have a road that leads into it that's about a mile long. And we get about 7 inches of snow in this area that never gets snow, just completely blankets the area. Our flight that was supposed to get us out of Dodge gets canceled. They give us opportunity to try and reschedule. The soonest we could get was on Tuesday at about noon, but it meant we had to find a way through the blizzard to get out of there. So the first challenge was the vehicle I had was not four-wheel drive, and I had to try and get through this 1.5 mile road. So it's 0 degrees out, wind chill minus 20, and I had to walk 1.5 miles to figure out where the road was so I didn't go off the road. I didn't have winter equipment, so I'd put as many layers of clothing as possible. My son's a fisherman, so I had his wading boots that I walked through the snow for 1.5 miles, marked out the territory, but then there's a gate at the end of the territory that you have to manually open. And the only way we were going to get through that gate is if I opened it ahead of time and we just floored it all the way through, because we were not going to get up the hill otherwise. So we do that, mark out it, and hit the gas, and we fortunately get out. We launch, and I'm turning the wheel as we launch because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I'm just guessing. I was watching YouTube videos on how to drive through the snow. I'm a Southern California boy. This is completely new to me.
That's a whole another element to this.
Yeah, we land on the icy road. We skid. I get us going. Now we've got country roads for a while we have to get through. And we're driving through the ice while we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. We're trying to reschedule flights. They keep canceling flights left and right. We don't have a hotel yet because we know we're going to have to stay in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for the night for the next day. But this all came on the heels of the storm stopped coming down about 3 a.m. The roads hadn't been cleared, and we had to navigate about a 3-hour drive up to Dallas-Fort Worth. So we're driving on the icy side roads. We finally get onto a freeway. The freeways are covered in snow because they don't have anybody to move the snow, but some brave souls had gone before me. So now we're skidding on and off as I'm driving my kids, who are, of all things, fighting over the electronics in the car and who's watching what on what iPad. And I'm just asking for silence, which is not happening. My mother-in-law's in the car, and, she's lecturing me on safe driving as I'm, just trying to survive. We finally get there. We go to a restaurant, and I'm like, okay, this is the last restaurant that seems to be open, but I think things are okay. Temperatures, below 0. We get in there, and I ask for a glass of wine at this Italian restaurant that's open, and they say it's BYOB. Never had that happen before. So now I'm upset because I wanted to be rewarded for my heroic driving.
Yeah, you needed a treat.
Yeah, I needed a treat. That doesn't happen. We then drive to the hotel. We get there. We're about to check in because I finally found a hotel that would do it. They say we have no heat, no power, no water. And if you'd still like to check in, we can do that for you. I said, we need to find a place that has that. So like a fool, I drive off from there, and we're now cruising the streets that are completely ice covered. And finally, I just pull off to the side of the road. We called 30 hotels. Nobody had any power. The phone lines weren't even working. So we go back to the hotel. We then check into this hotel with no power. The only thing they had was a solar generator so you could charge your cell phones. And our cell phones were on low batteries because I didn't think I was going to need to charge them. And so we got as much juice. We stayed the night in this hotel, freezing cold temperatures, but better than a lot of Texans were dealing with because we were actually in a hotel. The alarm goes off. We get on the road. I had to heat the car for 20 minutes because my Californian kids and wife and mother-in-law were not going to get in until that was heated. So below 20, we go our 8-minute drive to the airport. We can't see the signs on where to pull in for parking at the airport. Everything's still snow covered. Circle around for about 20 minutes. Finally find where we need to go. We park the car. We've got 90 minutes till the plane boards. We go in there. And now most of the American Airlines check-in desk and TSA are all shut down. So we had to go down about a half a mile, walking with our luggage. We get there, we get in line, and I realize there's a typo on my wife's name on the actual boarding pass, which means we're not getting through. So then we find the line that I need to go through, and we have to wait, and they only have 2 people going through that. So now the kids are panicking. We're not going to get back for school. And I'm just thinking, we were just told if we're not out on this flight, we won't get out for 4 or 5 days. That's how bad it is there. So I finally get up to the front, and the gal looks at me and she says, well, you obviously typed this in wrong. And I'm like, do we really need to have this debate right now? Can we fix it? And she says, TSA has put a block on your wife. And she says, we're now like 35 minutes before the flight takes off. There isn't time to fix it. I said, can you try? And so she gets on the phone with TSA via her cell phone because the landline wasn't working, and somehow navigates the way. We get on the plane, get out of Dodge, and we just escaped barely. But I mean, it was bananas. And we can only imagine all these friends we have in Texas, what they're dealing with right now, because they've got no clue what they're doing. They're going and actually going into cars because they can at least have fuel and heat in the car. And so it was just a banana situation. Fortunately, I landed at 11 o'clock. I had 4 meetings scheduled right after that. Got in, got to the office, and I made it back here. So when you guys said, I hope you weren't in Texas, I just was, but I barely escaped as of yesterday.
On this week's episode of Ice Road Truckers.
Yeah.
That was basically the abridged version of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with John Candy and Steve, what's his last name?
Martin.
Yeah, Steve Martin.
The reason we brought that up, guys, is we had a podcast scheduled right after Justin with Todd Sorrell from ePayPolicy. And, prayers going out to everybody in Texas. Todd's not able to make it today, obviously. When you don't have power, you don't have internet, which means you can't podcast. And there's obviously Justin, more important things to deal with.
Justin, I thought that story was going to be worse. So let's go all the way back to the front end of that story.
Mm-hmm.
When you said that somebody had to open the gate so that you could goose your car up that hill, I thought you were going to say that everybody jumped in the car, forgot to close the gate back, and 500 head of Santa Gertrudis cattle were scattered all over Texas, and the people at that ranch called you and said, don't ever come back here again, ever.
See, where we were staying, that section was actually a goat farm portion of it.
Right.
And there is a separate fence, but somebody's dog did get in. I think I locked their dog in. I'm sure they figured that out. But yeah, no, it was bananas. And the ranch that we frequent so often, they have wild exotic African animals. They lost about 25 of them. And just because there's just no one prepared for this.
Yeah, prayers go out to our folks in Texas because right now they are in a hurt locker. We have a running Facebook Messenger with our friend Aaron Robertson down in San Antonio, and he said a few things. And, of course, Bradley came on this morning and said, hey, Aaron, if you need a place to stay, I can give you directions to Scott's house. So we got that going for us.
And then I immediately apologized. I just could not help myself without doing a razz that early to Aaron. And he can take it. So.
Justin, let's talk insurance for a little while now.
Yeah.
I want to help these agents today, and I know you're a man that can do that. I usually tell people to go back in their DeLorean. I mean, you've got such a great resume all the way back into the early 2000s, 2004, 5. You started, I believe, in 2002. Tell me what you learned from your time, and it was a pretty good while. I mean, it wasn't a few days, it was years, with Arthur J. Gallagher, who is one of the heavyweights in the world of insurance brokers.
I told Bradley, I come from a family of insurance brokers. My grandfather was in the business. My father was. When I was 18, he said to me, are you ever coming in? Because if not, I'm going to sell. I said, I've heard you complain. There's no way I'm coming in. Right. And so what ended up happening was I met a girl and realized selling boxes and tape was not as lucrative as recurring commissions. So because my father had sold to them, and they're a big fan of nepotism there, I got an opportunity I shouldn't have otherwise gotten, because those who know me know I am not the extroverted salesperson. I'm more of an introvert, and also have dealt with a fair amount of social anxiety. So all that to say, I got the opportunity. What I did there was I knew I was never going to be a whiner diner type of salesman. I knew the way I was going to do this was mimic a Doogie Howser approach, where I was the most informed in the room, problem solving. But I've always had that entrepreneurial streak. So when I was at Arthur J. Gallagher, while I started off in a production capacity and continue to work in that, I also was in charge of developing the company's first small business unit and developing that model. So before you saw small business units on all these big companies, we were the first test case. That was my baby. So whether you like them or hate it, that is really where I spend a lot of my time. I'm an ops guy. I know every single process in our agency. I develop them. So I learned a lot there. And we also launched the first outsourcing initiative. So before Patra, before Resource Pro, Arthur J. Gallagher started working with India, and a lot of those teams came from our work on the outsourcing side. So what I learned too was that everybody, doesn't matter how large the organization, you have staff that do things differently. And the process of training people is broken, and it can't help but be broken if everybody does things in a different way, in different time frames, because now you're relying upon whoever has time to be the one who teaches you. And even if they don't have time, you're probably going to get a 5 out of 10 job teaching. And so I learned a lot about what goes wrong, especially in larger organizations, but that actually does apply to the smaller ones who have to wear a lot of different hats as opposed to those who have multiple layers of management.
Do you know how many people that I've worked for in my life, not to mention my agency staff that I have right now, that do not have the heart of a teacher? They know it, they understand it, but then when you have this expectation of this new hire coming in and you want that person that doesn't, they know it and they understand it, but you sit there and you listen in the next office or you walk by and you just kind of listen to what's going on and you're thinking, my God, there's no way, because they're either too impatient. Listen, Clinton Orr, if he's listening to this, he and I have had this discussion, so this isn't going to be a news flash for him. He kept telling me he wanted to manage people. He wanted to be a manager. He wanted to be a manager. I said, Clint, you can't be a manager. He said, why not? And I said, because about 3 minutes into trying to teach anybody, you always look at them and just say, why don't you know this? You know what I'm saying? That the level, I'm not sure if there is anything in this world that people don't have the sense of understanding about themselves more than the fact that they can't teach people. You know, they just don't have the heart of a teacher. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would give them a little bit of runway, if you will, because part of the other challenge is that we as agency owners don't provide opportunity. Typically, they've got a full workload already.
Right.
And so, and really, we've got tremendous data on this now. The job shadowing process, how we teach people, is broken. And so just to give you an idea, the first time one of your employees watches a process, take an issuing an auto ID card,
Right.
they only retain 15%. Second time, 30%, third time through about 60%. And that's among capable people. So what you have is that trainer becoming frustrated because they said, this person isn't retaining it. I keep having to explain this over and over again. The trainee thinks the trainer is incompetent, impatient, and not overly helpful. And so you've got a dynamic that's not set up, let alone the trainer has to try and talk down at the level of that new learner. And just to give you an example, on the most simple thing of reading a workers' compensation loss run, 22 key terms you need to know to be able to explain that loss run. You take the basics of insurance, and we've got 800 vocabulary words that are not common in the English language that new hire has to learn, and that person training them is expected to give them and make sure they retain it so they can have the actual capacity to transact. So it's a heavy-duty job we place on our staff to do it. So yes, a lot of them don't have the heart to train, but on top of that, the circumstances make it a very heavy load to lift.
I would agree with that. Yeah, the other side of that coin is time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got 6 quotes to do and 3 people to call back and 14 emails to answer. And, oh, by the way, Scott wants me to train this person today too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, that's unfair is what it is. And I know we're going to get to where you're going with this, which is why you came up with the Total CSR system. But before we get to that, let's back up. Now, we're also the president of Goodman Insurance Services. That's what you're doing. That's part of what you're doing in today's world, which I know you guys specialize in contractors. That's kind of your jam. Tell us a little bit about that and how you balance all of this, because I'm only hitting the surface here. Like when I look at your bio that I have in front of me right now, the first thing that comes to my mind is, my God, I need to spend 4 hours with this guy learning time management, because I mean, you've got so much going on, and we can talk about that too, but let's talk a little bit about being the president of Goodman Insurance Services, which I will assume at some level is how we came up with some of the other things you're doing too.
Yeah, so One of the reasons I have more time, it goes back to obviously having the right people, but it's systems, people, processes. So I very deliberately, when I bought my division back from Gallagher, said I want to build it a different way. And I want to make sure I can work on the business, not in the business. So what we do is we have a very robust, we take full advantage of our agency management system. I spent about $100,000 programming it to the way I wanted to be templated towards construction. And so I have time freedom because of a few things. One, everything down to our proposals is templated based upon the type of contractor we have, the company. So there's very little potential for error. So we've got that. On top of that, I outsource a bunch of work to Patra in specific areas that free my account managers up for critical thinking. I hire for critical thinking. I hire for emotional intelligence. And so I've got that component. So I've got the system, the processes. We make sure everybody has watched our processes over and over again and is certified in each. We've all agreed that it's best in case practice so that by the time they're working on a desk, it's pretty plug and play. And so I should only be involved in something that's outside the box or helping a producer close an account. And so everybody is given more leeway and the ability to make mistakes. We consider mistakes to be learning. And so we're fine letting them go down that path. And yes, that means a few extra pieces that I've got to get resolved, but ultimately it frees me up. So for example, I only have to spend 8 to 10 hours a week managing my agency, which allows me the time to go and work in these other capacities. I couldn't do it without my systems, process, and people in the right way. You build it the right way, and you can either spend more time working on it or other endeavors, but it has to be structured, and it does take time to build a machine that way.
Well, I'm sure too, there's agents that are listening to this that are thinking, yeah, it sounds good to say mistakes are learning, but what happens if that mistake is catastrophic? And I think to your point, I think you need to design your systems and processes in a way to prevent the catastrophic mistake. That way, there's no way that happens as long as the system and process and these templates are followed. We're talking about little mistakes along the way, right?
And it's even further than that. With my carrier partners, so we do a lot of surplus line stuff. And when I was dealing with, hey, who's going to be my wholesaler for, let's say, general liability, excess policies, et cetera, I said, here's the deal. I want certain exclusions. I want certain endorsements on every policy we sell. For this trade, it needs to be like this. Do not ever give me a quote that doesn't match these parameters. I don't care if it's higher. I want marketing summaries, et cetera. So we eliminate it from the wholesale side and from the carrier side. They are not allowed to do it that way. If I catch it more than once, I'm fine jettisoning it, finding a different wholesaler. We can do that because I put a lot of business with these guys, but it's there. And then down to, again, the step-by-step processes, the proposals. And when you have a culture that says mistakes are learning, what happens is they make the mistakes on the small stuff and they realize you're not going to judge them for it. And so when it comes to a more significant issue, they ask you ahead of time saying, I don't know. And we're fine with I don't know. Now, if I have to keep telling you the answer over and over again, it's a problem. But we have a culture that says, we're going to ask the question on any big thing. And as long as they know that I'm not going to look at them like an idiot, it works very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I can imagine too, from a learning standpoint, I'm sure I'm probably wrong on this, but there's some industries that are at a greater level, but there's probably no niche that you need to know more about that industry along with the insurance industry than construction.
You might have some professional liability areas if you're in that space, but construction, it's one of the reasons nobody wants to, as far as account managers, go into that space, because you have less sophisticated clientele as a general rule, more complex issues, higher litigation, especially in California. And so you do need to know it, and you do need to know by trade what those exposures are. Otherwise, yeah, you're in a world of hurt.
Scott, on a level of 1 to 10, how bad do you want to write contractors right now?
-5.
Yeah. I happen to know he doesn't like writing contractors. I like writing contractors.
I've never had a lot of luck with it. I have a few on the books here. We have, 10, 15 contractors on the books. And it's not that I don't like contractors, but I came from that world, which is counterintuitive, because you always hear that when you come from a world, that's probably going to be the best route to go to find your niche or niche, however you want to say it. But it's just not something that I've ever wanted to really deep dive into. Now, I'll say this. I've got friends of mine. I know a guy out of Birmingham, Alabama, that writes nothing but general contractors, home builders, and he makes more money than a show dog can jump over. But again, that's just not something, because of all the reasons that you just listed, not something that I've ever really wanted to deep dive into, not to mention the fact that for every contractor you write, the few that we do have on the books, it seems like every other day they're calling for a certificate of insurance. They've got to get to the city of this or that. And I've always heard that if you're going to deep dive into the world of contracting business, that premium level that I always talk about reduces significantly in terms of you're going to need more support staff to handle all the COIs and all the things that go along with that. Now, Justin, you may tell me differently because you may have technology and things in place that kind of eliminate that need today.
Yeah, so in California, our certs are pretty complex. Everything has both ongoing completed operations, additional insurance, primary non-contributory wording. Now it's typically on a blanket basis, but we process in my office 20,000 certs a year. And so we have it down to a science. We can issue a cert anywhere from 90 seconds to about 2.5 minutes on the most complex side. So it's all templated, all the data pulls. And so it's one of those things, if you're going to specialize there, you have to have a system down. Otherwise, it's going to be an unprofitable endeavor.
Yeah.
What do you guys do around, and you said you do a lot of surplus. We're located in a coastal area, so we do that as well. How do you guys systematize the agency bill process with renewals and things like that? Just out of pure morbid curiosity.
Can you be a little more specific in that?
How are you guys systematizing the way you're doing your billing? How are you, what's your checks and balances to make sure renewals are processed correctly and things like that?
So I have an ops manager who double checks all of our agency billing. Now, typically it's all finance. And again, I've got my own finance company, so I control every aspect of that process. Again, all of it's templated down to, hey, if there's an exception for a certain client level. So for example, because I've got my own finance company, I have larger customers that I don't want to charge them a high interest rate, and I'll actually take a loss on the lending there. I know they're good for the money, but just as a value add there. So we just, again, we template it, but backed up by my operations manager who's looking at the finances just to make sure we catch everything.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And is that an in-house person or is that outsourced?
It's in-house. I was very fortunate. The gal who used to run my dad's MGA ended up coming to work for me after I left Gallagher. She is 70. She is brilliant. She'll probably work another 20 years and is far smarter than me, works far harder than I do. And so we just call her Linda, but she's an adjective, like this superhuman, capabilities. And so we just lucked out that she cares more about the success of the agency than I do myself. I mean, she literally knew me since birth. And so we're just very fortunate in that capacity, but she is in-house, yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely. So you said she's your ops manager. Do you also have an agency manager that kind of oversees the day-to-day operations there?
No, we're pretty flat. So I'm brought in, but really everyone's expected to follow our process. We have systems and checks and audits. So if somebody diverts for it, we're going to catch it. I'm just not a huge believer in multiple layers of management just because they create their own fiefdom. And I think in a lot of cases, if your processes are correct and you're having the weekly meetings and you're discussing openly the mistakes that were made in those meetings, you don't need to have that level of management oversight.
Right. So I assume that from Goodman Insurance Services, we probably pretty quickly realized, because we were in the contracting business, that having another arm, meaning the premium finance side of this, was a great idea because it's a hand in glove relationship. Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, I just got tired of dealing with the finance companies and giving them the money when I had the capital to lend to my own customers,
Right.
who I had a vested interest because I want to get paid anyway.
Right.
So it just made sense, and it's been a competitive advantage for us.
Yeah. And then also, as you're hiring people and bringing them on board with your processes, your procedures, you probably had started developing the beginnings of what turned into Total CSR. And then from that kind of transitioned into, hey, we ought to turn this into something.
Yeah, so what happened was I train everybody, or historically have trained everybody like they were going to take over the agency. I want them cross-trained, knowing every aspect of it. But it took a long time and takes a lot of work to do it right. The problem is that from the companies I left and those of those size, they knew I was training people like that. So two things happened. Either my millennials and Gen Z realized insurance wasn't for them, or they were getting poached because that other company could afford to pay 30% more and they get a fully trained staff member. So that the math didn't work out for all I was investing.
Happened to me twice last year, by the way. I'm sorry, 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
And so we said, we've got to do this a different way, and said, let's take all this that I've developed, put it online. And so we started testing it. Agency owners were saying, hey, there's something to it, because I got a bunch of buddies that were like, let us in on this little secret of yours. And so we got serious, hired the head of e-learning from Toastmasters International, spun off a company. And that's what really was born from the Goodman side. Because specifically, if you look for training in the industry, you can find coverage training all over, but no one teaches how to do the job. We've been around for hundreds of years, and no one says, this is how you do it. It's all a game of telephone. And so that's why we created it. And that's why we ultimately spun off the company.
So I pulled this from the Total CSR website, www.totalcsr.com. Average agent is 59 years old, and 90% of agencies still don't have a formal training program set up to both attract and support new hires. That's a pretty staggering number, 90%.
And it's throughout all sizes. So we have everyone from 4-person agencies to Marsh. We have, I think, 50 of the top 1 privately held companies, and everybody was in the same boat. They had some version, but not really a plan to attract. And part of the challenge is only 4% of millennials or Gen Z even want to come into insurance. Mm-hmm. And so they had no way of attracting them. And so that was a challenge for a lot of agencies as well. And so we just, right place, right time with the right technology, we've been able to get this thing off the ground.
So for the 250,000 insurance agents that are listening to this right now, I want to give them some kind of meat and potatoes to think about when they get off this podcast. I'm sure every agency probably has some formal or informal training for new hires. There's probably a few that do the old sink or swim mentality. Hey, you're going to get in here. We're going to kind of show you what to do, and let's let you shadow somebody for a week or two, and we're going to see what you're made of.
That's how I got into the industry.
The old sink or swim mentality.
They literally said it's sink or swim. You either figure it out or you don't. And then they get pissed off because you didn't do things right. Like, well, nobody told me to do things right.
That is exactly what they did to me. When I started with Nationwide on July the 3rd, 2010, I remember my sales manager telling me no less than 5 times, this is sink or swim. This is sink or swim. You figure it out.
I'll give, before Justin jumps into that, and this is not a testimonial in the traditional sense, but I jumped on a demo with you guys several months back, and we're a client now. Justin did the demo, and I don't mean this offensively, but I'm thinking like, okay, similar to a pre-licensing course, something like that, as far as structure goes. And I was completely blown away at the level of depth you guys took this course. It is phenomenal.
Well, thank you.
And by the way, to all the insurance agents listening to this right now that are like, this is a bunch of bullshit, these guys are getting paid $0.0, Mr. Dublarski, am I getting paid to say this? I do believe that every agency, the ones that don't have a formal, structured, new hire, jam up system of how to hire their people, could benefit from a total, especially somebody like me that might be hiring like a new out of the insurance industry, coming into the insurance industry, commercial account manager, man, I'm telling you, there's a whole lot of pieces to that puzzle.
Well, it's one of those things too, like I was talking to Justin about this before we got on the call, is no offense to my vendor friends that have never sold a policy, no offense to them at all, but I like doing business with companies that are backed by agents, that the person who developed that used to be an agent, because there's always that little bit of extra just functionality that you get when the person who built the program you're using has also sold a policy. So it's very, and I was telling Justin, it's very important to me that on my behalf and on Scott's behalf, that people listening to this podcast realize that Scott and I are insurance agency owners that happen to do this podcast. Okay. It's not, the agencies are not a facade to make our podcast more legitimate. Not that that's like, I don't know anybody that's doing that, but it's very important to me to know that we are real agents just like you are. Ryan Hanley's a real agent just like you are. Jason Cass is a real agent just like you are. We are real people, and we are real agency owners, have the same problems that you have. And I was telling Justin, I was like, it's very important to me that they know that. And that's something that kind of impressed me with Total CSR, because prior to hopping on that call with you, Justin, I didn't know that, so it's very important, I think, to delineate to your audience is that, hey, look, these are tried and true. I mean, you've been at the top of the top from the agent standpoint, Arthur Gallagher, down to having your own agency now. I mean, that's really both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and I think the needs of agents, so it helps because, again, we've had all these agency owners continue to provide feedback throughout the way. And that's even the reason we've even morphed into what we are now, where even though we were delivering on the education side, they said, well, because our focus is new hires out of the industry, they said, how do we get the right people in? Because even the assessment system was broken. And I don't know if you guys want me to briefly go into really what I think is best in class, whether you use us or not, but I can give you a quick understanding of what the problem was and how we resolved that.
Please.
Okay, so a couple things. One, all this is data driven. We've had over 10,000 people go through our program. And so there's been a lot of mistakes on the way, and it's the agency owners who provide us feedback. So we love when we hear the criticism, we can make it better. But what happens is we think you should bring out new talent because we don't have enough in industry, and we keep poaching from each other, and you keep paying more and more for average talent. But the challenge is you want to hire for aptitude, attitude, emotional IQ, but the assessment companies out there charge on a per user basis. It's hyper expensive. And the way we typically have done it is we then get to the interview stage, and then we might spend some money on assessments, or we don't do it at all. Well, now we're jaded. We've got confirmation bias. So we launched, as part of this massive upgrade to our system, assessments on the front end. So we test for aptitude, emotional IQ, personality, and computer literacy. As soon as they apply for the job, that's poured into the system with their resume, LinkedIn profile, and they're ranked. And the reason we do this is before we even move to the phone screening stage, you need to see the real people from pretenders. And so you can then limit that. So you only move them forward to phone screening and when they get to that stage. Now they're at phone screening, and we give you questions to ask, and you decide who moves to the interview stage. The interview stage, what you're trying to do is vet during what happened in the assessment part of the process and say, okay, there's a red flag here, here, and here. And we give you structured questions based on the candidate so you can further vet that. And that's important because you just can only get so much information from an assessment. And yes, sometimes they can game it, so we want to flush that out. Usually agency owners are great BS detectors, but only when they have the data ahead of time to make sure they've got an informed decision. So now we've got something where on new hires, we've really gone through a formalized process to do this. And if they're brand new to the industry, then you can set them onto courses. Now, if they're existing talent, the problem is what you think you get is not really what you get. And so what we've done is we have insurance coverage assessments by line of coverage, but also the practical. They have to complete accord forms. They have to review quotes, understand loss runs. So you find out the strengths and weaknesses to make an informed decision on your hire. We want to take everything that is just, your guesswork out of the equation. So you're just hiring for aptitude, attitude, emotional IQ. You get them to the end, and then you put them in the training process. The reason we want to do this As far as a training process, it's far less expensive to bring someone new to the industry. Our goal is to have the world's most powerful recruitment magnet. Why? College is way too expensive. The value proposition isn't there, especially in our industry. If you take somebody, let's say I went to USC. I was fortunate. My parents paid for my education, and I did a lot of socializing there. I did not do a lot of learning other than when I got to my business management courses. That said, when you bring on a person who's got 4 years of private tuition debt or other debt along the way, when you're giving raises to that person, you're just helping pay down their student debt. So they're not seeing it as this huge reward. All you're doing is allowing them to service their debt a little bit more or accelerate that process, and it doesn't really excite them. Now, with a program like ours, you can go and say, I want junior college kids, I want high school graduates who pass these aptitude tests and are really bright, and say, look, we've got another alternative for you. You can come and really do a job working for us. We'll train you up. We'll pay you less in the beginning, but as long as you finish this course, you're going to have a job here. Specifically in California, if you go through our training program and you go license the practical and the commercial lines coverage side of things, you are going to be able to get a job at any operation in the state of California with a minimum salary of $50,000 a year without a college degree. So, and then you can scale from there. So it's a very straightforward process. The other thing agencies can do is advertise internships. And because the way our system is built, you can offer unlimited, number of users depending upon your package to go through our program so they can actually contribute during the internship process, and you can vet them. Again, it's far more financially savvy to do it that way than to continue to poach from each other and then try and retrain for all the bad habits. And then the last part of this equation is, well, there's two other parts of this equation, is you've got to be able to have your agency-specific processes learned. And as I mentioned in the beginning, by shadowing, we don't do it well. So now what we do is we take the pressure off account managers on the actual agency-specific processes. They watch the video 3 times through as a new learner. They shadow once, they watch the video again, they're off to the races. Saves a ton of time, and you get the best effort from your account manager. You can actually put that into our system, build your own e-learning courses just like we have. It's simple drag and drop technology. You can see the data on the completion. So we built it all within the platform. And last but not least, what's important is, even though I had high hopes for retention, there's so much information they can't retain it all. So we built the product Ellie. And in Ellie, you have access to our entire course library. And what you can do is search for, let's say I need to know how to calculate a net rate. I type that in. It's Google for insurance. It gives you the step-by-step instructions. If you have a coverage A exclusion under the CGL policy, it'll pull up the policy verbiage, the exclusion, and a layperson's explanation. So that resource is available in real time. So again, when we talk about E&O issues, they have the answer that's been vetted by our expert witnesses, and they can give the right answer even if they're newer in the business. And what I'll say is, agencies who have the right onboarding program, so I'll give my own example with my own agency. If you go through our training process, my 6-month employee at my agency will beat your 3-year employee hands down. My 3-year employee will beat your 10-year person. And that's just, it's that simple by doing the basics on the structured onboarding process. So again, all this can be done without a company like ours, but all we have to do is build the systems for these people, and they will flock to them like never before.
2 things on that. One, if you listen to that and we're not blown away, hit the little 15-minute skip backwards button about 4 times and listen to that again. 2, for me, it was the ability to build my own course that I really, really, really like, because we do a lot. So all of our processes in our agency are documented with flowcharts and with video, because some people learn visual, some people learn by watching and listening.
Right.
So we have, literally I think I'm on like my 4th free Loom account, because I use all the gigabytes up that they give you for free, and I'll just create another one with another email. I'm not advocating that. I love Loom. Don't sue me. But I'm able to now take all of that and kind of put it in my own course. So when people are training, not only are they training on this phenomenal stuff that Total CSR's put together, they're training on my processes too, and the way we do things, which, as you can imagine, is a little bit differently than your average agency is going to do things.
So are what you guys saying, because there may be some agents out there that don't understand what we're talking about right now. So Bradley, are you able to go into Total CSR and take some of their processes or all of their processes tweak them to fit your agency, and then put that on your interagency website type thing?
I believe it's all done in Total CSR, correct, Justin?
Yeah. So Scott, let me give you what it does. So essentially, all of our processes, from learning accords, loss runs, et cetera, is system agnostic, right? So even though we're platinum sponsored and applied, they have their own training programs. They're not going to let us sell training on their systems.
Right.
And so what this is imagine you go through our new hire training of 80 hours, and then you bookend it with your specific agency management system, your niche specific training that's in there. Now, we don't have the ability to edit our coursework for the specific reason. It's all been vetted, it's all done, and it's really foundational and taught in the right way. Where you're going to find that extra value is by building out your coursework specific to your agency. It's all housed and firewalled. Nobody else is ever going to be able to see your stuff, but it then provides this roadmap because we have all the stats on usage, testing percentage, duration, and coursework. So you'll be able to see that for your training as well. So it's all encompassed in one place where, again, you can oversee that process and make sure your staff's doing it all the right way.
Got you. But you have to be a member or have an account with Total CSR to access that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where I was getting at. I didn't know if there was a way that you paid for it and then you could bring it into your VPN or something like that. So what would you do if you're one of these agents that are out there? Maybe they've hired an account manager that they feel like needs some help kind of getting up to speed, or maybe it's a new hire that they just brought on board and they really need somewhere to send them, because you can't believe how many people, Bradley, back me up on this, on something like Insurance Soup, which is a Facebook page for insurance agents, insurance professionals, specifically principal and associate agents. But you can't believe how many people ask the question like, hey, I need some training. Where can I go to get training?
Well, and the thing is, like, I understand the purpose of some of these designation programs, and I've taken a couple courses for a couple designations. I've never finished it, so I probably I'm a little bit biased, but like, I'm of the belief that the customer doesn't give a crap about the 4 letters after your name. They want to know what you can do for them.
Right.
And like, training needs to be functional, not a vanity metric.
Yeah.
And I'll add to that. The reason for designations, and I'll tell you the reason we have ours, is in a lot of cases, it's actually a function of advertising. So the reason these big companies have it is you see those initials, what's that initial? And they keep telling you that the customer cares. I've never met a customer who even asks if I have a college degree or asks about my designation. Now, the reason we have designations is because our clients want them so they can put them on there because they think it looks good. Mm-hmm. We know it's really done for advertising purposes. And some organizations, you have to pay a fee every year to just continue to have the designation. So it's a moneymaker for them.
Well, I remember there was a designation that I started when I was at the captive company I worked for. I remember telling an agent I wasn't going to, he was like, oh, when you finish it, you're going to have to get new business cards. Cause we had just finished a conversation where I showed him my new business cards I'd ordered. And I was like, yeah, I went ahead and ordered like 6,000 of them. And, oh, you have to order new. I was like, no, I was like, I'm actually not going to put it on there. And he was just like, so I'm like, dude, if it takes up space on the card, that's taking space away from actual literal call to actions that can lead business to me. I'm not going to put it on there. And I remember getting like 3/4 of the way through the course. And I was like, I'm literally learning nothing right now that I'm going to use in the real world. Let's go find something that I can use. And this was several years ago, younger Bradley Flowers. It was full of piss and vinegar. So
hey, Bradley, I got one better for you.
Yeah.
Here, ladies and gentlemen,
and if you have designations, that's no disrespect whatsoever.
Let's talk about what a shitbird Scott Howell is. Are you ready?
Sure.
Scott Howell has designations, and I don't even know what they are. I swear to God, as I sit here right now, I went through a 2-week commercial line something thing that I've got a designation for, and then one other one too that I've got. I swear on my son's life, I don't even remember what the letters are that I have a designation for.
That's not
so. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at.
That's the most Scott Howell thing I've ever heard. Justin, I want to point out one thing you said before you went into the specifics of the program, you said something to the fact of, you've taken agent feedback or user feedback and improved the program on that. That is something that I don't think is talked about amongst agents enough, because as agents, we like to fuss and moan about our vendors and our carriers. There's no vendor that I use that I haven't fussed about at some point if we've been in a relationship long enough. But it's so important as an agent, and this is not a pitch for Total CSR, it's so important as an agent to do business with vendors and carriers that are willing to not only listen to your feedback, but take it and use it to improve their systems. I was talking this morning, I was on the phone with the carrier that we all know. They gave me, they're improving some stuff and adding some products, and they gave me an Amazon gift card to wrap for a couple hours, which I appreciated. And they were like, well, what's your frustration with this? I was like, well, if you guys are going to direct bill, you need to download. If you're going to download, you need to download commissions. If you don't download commissions, it's not even worth doing the download, in my opinion. Okay. What about an underwriter? Oh, I'm okay with an underwriter as long as they don't hold the process up. What about this? Okay, I'm okay with this as long as, and then we get to the end and they're like, what would be any deal breakers on you piloting this product? I was like, there's not any. They're like, what if it does the 3 things that you said you didn't think it should do? And I said, well, that's okay, as long as you guys recognize that that's a problem and that's not going to be the end of the road. You need to improve on it. One of my biggest frustrations with one of our wholesale brokers right now is they do those 3 things poorly, and we're good. Like you should be happy that our name is on your deck page. You know what I mean? There's no improvement. So it's so important, I think, to do business with companies that are willing to take your feedback and use it for improvement, and understand that the iteration of their systems processes right now are not the final iteration of them. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. And I would add that I don't know why companies don't take that in, because I get free consulting. I get free consulting from very smart people at very different types of agencies who have different needs. And so it allows me to scale faster and solve the problems. It's one of the reasons we haven't taken outside money, because then they dictate the process and what you can work on.
You just answered the question.
Yep.
So
it's focusing on private equity. It's focusing on exiting. And I've gotten a little bit of flack lately from people on LinkedIn who have said that me saying that making an exit your goal is a bad thing. I'm not saying exiting is a bad thing. I'm saying making exiting your goal is going to take your eye off the customer ball. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens. That's what happens.
It's an unintended consequence that's going to happen if you start down that road.
Bradley says exiting's bad. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying making it your goal, you're taking your eye off the ball. Yeah. And I think that, and there's always going to be cases where you as an agent are asking for something and either A, it doesn't make sense, or B, you're the only person asking for it. So why would we change everything else for just you? But in a general sense, if you're a company and you've got multiple users asking for something similar, you probably should go ahead and figure out how to do it.
And it's part of, even we have a tally sheet of how many times we get asked the same question, what about that functionality? And we let the demand deal with it. The difference is when you deal with, let's throw out agency management systems, they'll have such a long runway. You may have 1,000 agencies saying we need it now, and it's 2 years down the development pathway. When we hear 1,000 agencies say we need it now, we've got to get it in 3 to 6 months tops, because otherwise the frustration, that friction of doing business with us is too difficult.
Yep.
Hey, Justin, I got to get back on the road here. Okay. All I do is communicate through the 250,000 insurance agents listening to this right now. Here's what they're thinking 2 things, because they think just like I do. Number 1, I got an account manager that needs to train. They need to get better. I got one right now that could probably get better. And I want to use Total CSR. How long is the training? What does that entail in terms of, hours and study sessions? Talk a little bit about that. And then the second thing is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is, how much does this shit cost?
Great question. So first, let's talk commercial lines. That's 60 to 80 hours of training. It's all self-paced. Again, we can track usage throughout the system. The best in class, we've seen agencies who have the most success, is on a new person, get licensed, go through the 80 hours straight. And then if you're going to have them take the advanced coursework, wait a few months, have them space that out because it's just a little too much meat at the time. Personal lines is about 35 to 60 hours, depending upon the speed of the user. And employee benefits is about 20 hours. Our advanced coursework is another 40 hours. So that's the duration. All self-paced. We have tons of quizzes, activities throughout to make sure they've got that retained. As far as cost, we just upgraded the platform. So there's 4 separate options. There is the options. So we have hiring, assess, train, and support. So HATS. For just the H and the A, hiring and the assessing side of the equation, I think it's $4.99 a year for that product. But if you want to have our entire suite, you have an option for 1 active user or unlimited. For 1 active user, it's $2,000 a year. But an active user is defined as that active seat. So if Janie's going through our program and she finishes and you put her to inactive, you can put Frank through. So we could have 4 agents go through in a year on that. That doesn't stop you from doing all the assessments and assessing all your team members, but it's 1 user there. The other is unlimited. So we have agencies who are putting everyone through our program or everyone through our advanced program. And then obviously for those with 4 or more offices, we have an enterprise option, which we do different types of pricing as it makes sense to do that.
I've said this 100 times and I'll say it 100 times again. When my agency changed, when we went from being pretty stagnant to growing and becoming what I always wanted our agency to become, is when I hired Laura Bruno out of Southern California as well to come in and start doing our hiring assessments before I just went out and hired my buddy's cousins, sisters, aunts, uncle's brother to come work at the agency, which that's the way folks used to do. You know, you see some kid out there waiting tables. Hey man, you want to come sell insurance? Yeah, sure. That's when our agency turned the corner. And then to have something like Total CSR, which I don't really know of anything else out there like that. Oh, I had one other question for you too, Justin, before we go. The training that these people do, let's say the commercial 60 to 80 hours, are those video-based training? Or is it like you at a whiteboard talking about, how does that work?
So the short answer is no. So we've got a very clean interface where you've got interactive flashcards, scenarios. They're actually practicing accords in the system. We created a virtual sandbox so they can practice doing the job. Now, our advanced coursework is a combination of all those interactivities plus video, just because it's so meaty that you'd be bored to tears if you didn't have our gal going through on the video explanations.
Right. That's pretty cool that you have kind of a little bit of a mix of all that. And you've got practice accord forms, so nobody has to be worried about, man, I'm going to screw this up. You know, because you get a lot of that too when you're in the quote unquote, air quotes, sink to swim mode. You're sitting there looking at a chord form, man, you know, going, my God, I hope I don't screw this up. But I think that for agencies, big or small, having something like Total CSR, whether it's just from we want to train our existing people that we can tell need to go from good to great, or whether it's going from, hey, we want to utilize Total CSR as our kind of total encompassing package of new hire, retaining and recruiting good people all the way through to the training. Man, I see it something that I would highly encourage every agency to at least go take a look at. And Bradley and I talked, I've had this idea for like 5 years that I wanted to do a insurance pre-licensing school sponsored by Scott Howell, where I'm at a whiteboard just like breaking shit down Big Bird style for everybody, telling stories, one video after another, kind of like a Lightspeed or something like that. And Bradley and everybody else I tell that to just stops me like right in my tracks. And they're like, there's no way, because every state, you're going to have to go through every state to get, what do you call that? Like approved, I guess.
Accredited, yeah.
And the time, energy, and effort it would take to do something like that.
Also, everybody charges like $80 for that. So you're like basically a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. That's true as well. But man,
they would have to really, 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 really want to hear your voice.
Yeah. But Bradley, when was the last time, do y'all know how horrible it is to sit in a classroom with an 80-year-old, like reading straight from the pre-licensing textbook to you. I mean, it is beyond awful. Does anybody disagree with that?
I don't disagree.
It was one of the worst things I've ever been through in my life, sitting there listening, just droning on and on about that. But man, I wish y'all could come up with something like that. That'd be fantastic. We need a jam up pre-licensing course per state. I think that would be fantastic.
Let me just briefly tell you on that point. It's the pre-licensing stuff. We all know you got to forget it in the real world.
Right.
So it's one of those things where that's where our practical training comes in to showcase that. And as Bradley said, it's a race to the bottom. They keep making it inexpensive. So they're never going to invest in that. And because you got to keep jumping through the DOI hurdles, it's just a challenge and a half. So God bless anyone who wants to take on that challenge.
Yeah, my idea has been, it's been 86 quite some time ago. Don't worry about that. So I want you to give our 250,000 insurance agents out there something that they can leave with today. Talk to them a little bit about what you feel like for all those agencies that are kind of stuck in that rut of they've kind of hit a plateau. They need to get to the next level. What do you think that they need to do just as an agency owner to kind of get out and get to that next level?
I think they've got to be honest about what their objectives are and whether they want a lifestyle business or they want to scale it. On top of that, there's so many resources available. I think you guys are both members of IAOA. You've got resources to even vet vendors that you want to look at and get insight there. You have to be able to take a look at resources, digest them, and be willing to do that hard work that's not fun. I have a lazy brain, so it's really difficult to work through the minutia. We also, just as an insight, we publish a bunch of ebooks on how to do a bunch of this stuff. It's free. You don't have to give your email address or anything on our website just so that you can leverage that information. But really, you've got to pick mentors and say, objectively look at my business, tell me what's wrong, be fully transparent, take that feedback just like we do with our product and say, where are my blind spots? And then have someone to hold you accountable through that process. The only way I work out is if I've got a personal trainer, I have a 10-minute workout and I'm too lazy to even do that. So I don't have a personal trainer either, but you've got to have someone to hold you accountable. I think that's one of the biggest things, along with that objective look at what you're doing right and wrong.
I was talking to a new agent the other day and I said, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is find a mentor or someone that you are not scared to ask questions that make you feel stupid.
Right.
I had that when I started. Several people, as you can imagine, that I was not scared to pick up the phone and say, hey, how do I do, when I opened my independent agency, I had no idea what agency bill was. Like I had to figure all that out. And I asked all those, what I considered at the time, stupid questions to people.
Hey, Bradley, have I ever made you feel stupid when you called me with a question?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I don't think you've ever made me feel stupid because sometimes I call you with some question about something.
There's no stupid question.
I agree, but I do know people that will make you feel stupid. So,
that does exist.
I'll tell you the thing too that you got to be careful of. You call the wrong person, then they're out telling 15 people, you know that some bitch didn't even know what such and such was. That can happen too. So, well, hey, Justin, thank you so much for being on the show today, man. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to Bradley. I want to have you back on here. And I have a sneaky suspicion I've got a couple of account managers that you may see jumping on the old Total CSR system here pretty soon, because I know of 2, if not 3, that I think would really benefit from having some more learning, if you will, on their job and how to, do it better. And I guarantee you every insurance agency owner or associate agent listening to this right now is probably thinking about some account manager or somebody in their agency that could benefit from Total CSR, because we've all got them.
Well, awesome, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. And just as far as your listeners go, you can reach me on LinkedIn, et cetera. I'm on the phone constantly with agency owners. There aren't stupid questions you can ask me. I get back pretty promptly. Again, Total CSR related or not, I typically, because I'm working with all these agencies, have the resources available to point you in the right direction. And again, it's like you guys, if we can all help each other get across the finish line, there's more than enough business for all of us out there.
If they want to go check out Total CSR, it's www.totalcsr.com, correct?
Absolutely.
All right, guys, listen to me. I've given you one more bullet for your gun here, guys. You can go to totalcsr.com. You can, for not a whole lot of money, get that account manager that is just serviceable enough in your agency, but still makes a lot of mistakes. You can get them trained up. You can also follow their path for new hires and start creating some value, and quite frankly, might keep you from making a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 mistake, because when you hire the wrong person and keep them in your agency for about 9 months, start calculating the consequences of that, because it is a lot of money when you start calculating that. But as I always say, rewards come from action, not discussion. Get your ass out from behind that desk today. Go out in the big bad world, create relationships, hire great people, create great systems, create great processes, and help us help you paddle very slowly to that lighthouse that I'm talking about. Let's get better every single day and go out and make money for your family, for your wife, for your husband, for your kids' college fund, and for your parents that are struggling out there today. Let's go make money for them. And go ahead and write good business for the agencies that you represent, and write good business for the companies that you represent. Bradley Flowers, I love you.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Justin. We appreciate you, brother. Guys, you are listening to the Insurance Guys podcast, and we'll see you back here real soon. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Insurance Guys podcast. If you need to know more about me, or you need to get in touch with Scott, you can always reach me at theinsuranceguyonline.com, or email me at iprotectins@gmail.com. And if you need to get in touch with Mr. Bradley Flowers, go to bradleyflowersinsurance.com, or email him at bradley@saralandinsurance.com. Guys, we love you. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to being with you again real soon on the next episode of The Insurance Guys. Take care.